Bible, I try to keep to 20 or 30 minutes, but sometimes issues are more complicated, and I'm not normally talking about complicated issues, but today is part of the complicated issues, so I hope that's okay. We already took a vote before you came that I could take my coat off, so it doesn't matter if you like it. You're too late now to get involved in that. You missed it for not being early. So we're going to get started. Is this our group? Okay, today we got the title right on there. And you can see where is the real Mount Sinai, the Exodus, and the Sinai wanderings. This talk could go on for 3 or 4 hours. I've kind of limited down to try to make it a summation. You will not be entirely happy on some areas probably because I can't do it all. For example, I can't give a full explanation of when was the Exodus. It's a very complicated topic that could take an hour itself. So I'm just going to summarize in a slide or two and give you a reference where to go if you want to talk about that. But we are going to try to talk about issues that people are talking about today, and we're going to start right out with the issue of the Sinai. Where's the real Mount Sinai? That's the issue that we're going to really deal with. And subsequent to that, we have to talk about the Exodus, because it doesn't. If you don't know where the Exodus, when it was, then it's hard to know where the place was, and the Sinai wandering. With that in mind, let's see where we can go from here. Okay, if we start out with the Bible, and that's what you'll find for me, I am all about the Bible. If it's not in the Bible, then it's hard for me. When I was an archaeologist, I had a hard time because I don't have many pictures of churches, because in the Bible lands, the Roman Catholics have put church pictures everywhere a place was. My friends would say, well, let's go see that church. That's the church where they stoned Stephen. Well, it has nothing to do with it, so you don't find me taking a picture of it. I'm not interested in that. I'm all about the Bible. So the subjects that we're talking about are what I would call biblical topics, and therefore I'm going to start with the Bible, and I'm going to end with the Bible. So let's start where I think the issue of the Exodus starts, and that is with the coming of the Israelites into Egypt, because there are some clues there, starting with this verse, in Genesis 47, verse 6. Just to keep you awake, why don't you read the verses with me? How about that? Because I ate so much nice food that I might drift off, and if I hear you talking, I'll be woken up. Read it with me. The land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. And if you know any capable men among them, then put them in charge of my livestock. Obviously, this is Pharaoh talking to Joseph, and he says they can settle in Goshen. Now, I wish the Egyptians had somehow used the word Goshen, but unfortunately, Goshen is not found in Egyptian, as far at least as a term for geography. So we don't have any help from the Egyptians, but there is help in this same passage, because it says, anyway, I just highlighted the word Goshen. It's the best of the land, and in Goshen, and they're supposed to be in charge of the livestock. Let's try Genesis 47:11. Read it with me. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses. So we know that Goshen is somehow connected with Ramses, as Pharaoh had ordered. Again, I want to mention this very thing. And then we have another reference from the Bible in Exodus chapter 1, verse 11. Read it with me. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. So we have at the beginning of the biblical account of the Israelites coming into the land, we have place names that are later mentioned in the biblical text. So at least we have a starting place from where the Egyptians started when they exited across from Egypt into the Sinai. So let's start with here. I'm going to just emphasize the same word is used, the best, and it's associated with the city of Ramses. All right, so I want to kind of explain to you a little bit about geography now that we talked that a little bit. And do we have a pointer? We started out with one. I said I didn't need it till this afternoon. It's back there. And that way I can point. I won't have to run over and use my important finger to point. But the Bible lands as a whole are kind of like California. We have any Californians here? Thank you very much. It's a Mediterranean kind of climate. The difference with the Bible lands in California, the Bible lands gets rain from October through May, and after that there's no rain. There's no rain in July. In New Mexico, we're in the monsoon. Well, we're really past the monsoons, but the monsoons are continuing on for whatever reason. But generally, we would just rarely have rain, and then monsoon time is like in July through August. In the Bible lands, we only get rain in the winter up through the spring, and that's no more rain at that point. So here we have, now I got to figure out how to, what's the trick? Center button? Woohoo! Right there it is. So here's what's often referred to as the Fertile Crescent. You got the Tigris River coming in here, and here you have the Bible lands, and here is Egypt. And when I was a child, I would see this as, here you see the Red Sea. In my mind, what I assumed was, here are the Israelites, they're living over here, and they jumped right across there, they crossed the Red Sea. The problem with that is that nobody lives here, not even in Bible times, because Egypt itself is the worst of the places for rain. It gets rain in the wintertime a little bit, but below the delta, where most people actually live, they never get rain. In fact, when they do get rain, they call it a miracle. And they get 1 or 2 inches up here in the delta, but they have lots of agriculture. Why do they have agriculture? Irrigation, absolutely. The Nile flows northward, and they have these canals that come off of here, and so it's lush and green in the delta. And in this area, if you look carefully at the map, even though it doesn't look so good here, you only have planting corn and so forth within a mile or a kilometer of the Nile River because they use irrigation. So nobody is living out here. It's just, so when the Israelites said they did not cross here because there wasn't any place to cross. Let's, what's the next trick to go forward?
The other one, that's only a pointer.
Oh man, this is going to be hard. Woohoo! Now they're going to be complicated. Good luck to you. Here we go. All right, here's a little better look at Egypt itself. Just so you'll know, this is the Nile River again, and the Nile flows this way. So where is Upper Egypt? It's in the south, and Lower Egypt is in the north. If I get that straight after eating lunch, good luck to me. But the river flows like this, and you see the little green along here? That's the only place where people live. They don't live out here, although there are 7 oases out here that do have rain, and the Fayum is the largest one. But nobody lives out here, or rarely anybody out here, because there's no water. And you've got to have water to live, right? So the population is either along this area in major cities or up in this area, which is the delta. Now, guessing from what Pharaoh said to Joseph, the Israelites were herders of sheep and goats, and the people in Egypt were agriculturalists. They didn't like sheep herders, and they kept them out as much as they could, and I'll tell you more about that later. But what is understood by Ramses is probably this area of the country, with the main city being right here. This is Cairo, but in earlier times, this was up in Memphis, is a little bit lower than that. It's not exactly where I would place it if I were placing it. But generally, Goshen is thought to be in this area because when the Israelites came down, they came down like this, like other sheep herders did, and they settled them in the best of the land, which was the land that was already green and a great place for having for agriculture as far as raising animals. So let's start out with 3 facts that we could agree on. Number 1, Egypt is mostly desert. In fact, it's said by someone kind of in jest, Egypt is the only country that is 600 miles long and 1 meter wide. Now, it's kind of a joke. They really mean one kilometer wide. But it's just along the Nile, and you can always see across the Nile. It's a very narrow. And then agriculture only extends half a mile or so along the way. So whenever you're on the Nile, you can always see the desert on the other side. And it's just whatever irrigation they do close by. Number 2, the Israelites lived in the Delta, which is thought to be the place of Goshen. And number 3, as you know, after a while, the Israelites became slaves. All right? So that's what we would say are facts from the very beginning, not anything great in the story. The question is, where is the city of Ramses? Because it's the key point that is mentioned. Now, archaeologists have disputed that for a long time, and they've moved it around. And you have to be careful. If you read a really old book, it'll be in one place, and a newer book will put it in a new place. But it's known to be where Ramses is today, is in it's in the eastern part of the Delta. Now, here's one slide. I've moved from a whole hour presentation just to one slide. I encourage you to look at the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Dictionary under the topic of the Exodus. Because an important part of understanding where Ramses is to understand that among conservative Christians, there's disagreement of when the Exodus was. I'm going to tell you that most Bible-believing scholars, they're my friends who used to belong to the same society I was the president, called the Near Eastern Archaeological Society. Most of them believe that the Exodus happened in the 13th century. Seventh-day Adventists, of which I am part of that family of scholars, believe that the Exodus happened in the 15th century, 13th or 15th. What's the difference? Well, the 13th century, my 13th century friends, they based their interpretation on Exodus chapter 1:11 that says the city of Ramses. The issue comes about because archaeology has never found the use of the name Ramses before the 13th century. So there are references mentioning Ramses in the archaeological record only in the 13th century, 14th, 15th century, no mention at all. In Exodus chapter 1:11, it mentions it. So my archaeological friends, conservative friends, they say Exodus had to be in the 13th century. Now, Seventh-day Adventists, and again I encourage you to look at the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Dictionary and the commentary, you'll find that Siegfried Horn, who was the mover and shaker on this, pointed out using 1 Kings 6:1 that you have to have 480 years after the Exodus to the time when Solomon built his temple, the 4th year of Solomon. 1 Kings 6:1, you know what I'm talking about? I didn't look it up for you, but I've got it on here. If you want to look it up later, you can see it. It mentions Solomon at the coronation when he inaugurates the temple. He says it's 480 years since the Exodus till now. To put that then, and to accept that as a biblical chronology, means that, based on 6:1, suggests that the name Ramses is an anachronism, just like Genesis 41:11. For example, when you consider, here's Exodus 1:11, I do put it under. So they appointed taskmasters over them to afflict them with hard labor, and they built for Pharaoh's store cities, Pithom and Ramses. So my friends would say, oh, that means that since that was there, that Israelites had to be there in the 13th century. But here's the problem, is Genesis 47:11. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt and the best land in the land of Ramses. None of my archaeological friends would say that Jacob or Joseph lived in the time of Ramses. None of them would accept that. And if I ask them about it, they'd say, oh, that's an anachronism. Which means, like I said last night, an anachronism is like someone says, I knew Stephanie Merling when she was a girl. Well, was Stephanie Merling when she was a girl? No, that's an anachronism. That takes her name from the present and puts it in the past. And I'm going to tell you, like other Seventh-day Adventists, that I think the use of the name Ramses is an anachronistic use of it, where a scribe was writing along, he came to the original name and said, oh, this has got to be this has got to be the same name as Ramses. So he put the new name in place. All right. Here's historical facts. Here's what they are. Whether the Exodus occurred in the 15th century or the 13th century, there is a place called Tel Adaba, and it was the staging area that came to be called Ramses. Originally it had another name, but in the 13th century it was changed to Ramses. So it's the same place, whatever the name is. I'm going to say that in the 15th century it had an earlier name, and it's an anachronistic use later, but it's still the same place. So the Israelites left from the same place, whether it's in the 13th century or the 15th century. So here's the more recent map, and you'll see right there Tel Adaba. That's the place that archaeology, and Kantir is the area of the area, and that's the place where was Ramses, and it was known historically as Ramses. Therefore, I'm going to say that the Exodus started there as the center. There were Israelites, I'm sure, around the area, but that was the heart of the land where Goshen was. All right, Exodus 13:17. Now when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of Philistines, even though he was near. For God said, the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Now I'm going to say this is another anachronistic use. The Philistines did not come into the land till the 12th century, till the 13th century. So again, that's another anachronistic use. But there is a way that was called in the later times. It was called the way of the Philistines, and it was a special way that went like this. Whoops! Woohoo! How'd that happen? How did I do that? Okay. Here's the way, and the biblical. Well, I got these wrong here. Biblical text says, I'm not going to let the Israelites go in the way of the Philistines, which would have been a direct route that way, because if they go that way, they're going to find war, and they might want to quit. Would the Israelites quit if it saw war? Who knows what they would do? You know, they're always causing trouble. And what we know archaeologically is that along this way where the Israelites would have gone, we found that Egyptian records suggest that there are at least 23 forts along this way, and the Israelites would have had to face every one of them if they were going on the way of the Philistine. This is the land of Philistine. If they went that way, they would have had to face all of those fights, just like the Bible said. So God says, I'm not going to take them that way. I'm going to take them another way. Exodus 12:37. Now the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. Now, the Seventh-day Adventist scholar Bill Shea says that Succoth is the same place as Mashkut. And we won't go into all the details on that. But Succoth means booths or tabernacles, and it also refers to a festival and so forth. But the bottom line is that the Israelites would have come somehow like this, and this is where Succoth is, and Telemeskata or Mashkut is this way. And so, following the idea of Bill Shea, the Israelites would have come along the Wadi Tumalat and worked their way out into the desert, according to understanding how the Bible is. Now that site was excavated by a guy named Henry Neville. He's an Egyptologist, and he excavated this site, and there he found chambers and assumed that the bricks here helped made the Israelites' store city of Pithom. He suggested that this was actually Pithom where the Israelites would have worked. Exodus 30:20 says, then he sent them out from Succoth and camped in Ethan on the edge of the wilderness. So what I'm suggesting to you is the Israelites came along, and they went along the Wadi Tumalat, which is a clearly marked path where they would have had water all the way. And then Exodus 15:22 says this. To me, this is a seminal point of what I'm saying to you today. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of where? Wilderness of Shur. So according to the Bible, the Israelites are in Egypt. They cross across the Red Sea, and when they cross the Red Sea, where are they? They're in the wilderness of Shur. So however and whenever the Israelites cross, they've got to be in the land of Shur when they cross. So the question is then, what and where is this wilderness of Shur? Because if you want to find out the way they went, you got to find Egypt on a map, Then you got to find the wilderness of Shur, because when you cross one, you cross the other. When you go from New Mexico to the east, you go to Texas. When you go to the west, you go to Arizona. You find New Mexico in the middle, and then you look to the right, you find Texas. You look to the left, you find Arizona. It's that clear. If you want to find the crossing site, you've got to find Egypt first. Then you've got to look to the direction where the wilderness of Shur is. All right. And I want to encourage you, you should have brought your Bible. Did you bring your Bibles, any of you? Anybody have maps in the back of their Bible? Let's take a little bit of time, just for the fun of it. I haven't looked at your Bible, so I don't know. I may be embarrassed, but I don't think so. Let's look at there you go. Let me see your map. Here's your map. Oh, they don't have anything in here. They didn't identify anything, but there's a map. Anyway, it looked like that. That's the map I'm looking for here. Okay, got a map of this area. Look here. You have the here. Look at the map. Here's the Sinai Peninsula. What does it say? The way of Shur. The way of Shur is mentioned a number of times in the text, and that's where you know the wilderness of Shur is located. Okay, it's not detailed enough, but this was from one of my previous Bible. It's not this one, but this is from my previous Bible, and you can see what it is. Can you read it? Right there? Wilderness of Shur. Why is it called the wilderness of Shur? That's the question. You leave Egypt, you're in the wilderness of Shur. Why is it called the wilderness of Shur? Now we're going to spend 15 or 20 minutes on this because it's important for you to know where the wilderness of Shur is. This is another map. I just typed in the wilderness of Shur on my computer, chose images, and this is an image. Look where it is. See where it is? Why in the world would that be called the wilderness of Shur? And you got the way to the Shur. What's that about? Well, let's kind of understand that. Okay, sometime during the Middle Kingdom, that's the Egyptian Middle Kingdom, there was a pharaoh by the name of Amenemhet I, not Amenhotep, but Amenemhet I. He began being pharaoh in 1991 BC. That's an important date, which we don't need to talk about, but archaeologically it's an important date because it marks the first historic time that we can connect with an event, and it's very complicated, but it's 1991 BC, not 91 AD, but BC. Okay, he had problems in his domain. You won't believe the problems because we don't have them today. His problem was immigrants trying to come into his country. We never heard of that problem. But he had problems like that. They had same problem in Babylon. And you know what they did in Babylon just like he did? He built a wall to throw them out or keep them out. We don't hear anybody keeping fences to keep the people out, do we? We don't hear about that. But he had a problem. And what he did, he built a wall, a barrier to keep them out. Now his barrier was not just a chain link fence. His barrier was a combination of things. He dug a canal, he built fortresses along the canal, and the whole process was to keep them out. But this wall was called the wall of the wall of the ruler. You know what the word for wall is? Shur. So when you find about the wilderness of Shur, it's saying the wilderness of the wall. And when you talk about the way to the Shur, it's the way to the wall. Okay? All right. Shur equals the wall, and the way of the ruler equals the way to the Shur. All right? This wall was a combination of physical barriers which included a canal and small outposts of soldiers stationed along the course of the canal. So there was a canal, and at certain places when the canal was not very strong or very big, they put a fortress there. And all of this was to keep these immigrants from the east, the migrant people, those people like the Israelites. They were Bedouin, not really Bedouins, but that's the best term I could use, that came on with their sheep and the goats, and they were kind of pushing into the land all the time. And the Pharaoh didn't like it. He put this barrier up, and it became known as the way of the wall, or the way of the Shur. Okay, this is an example of this is one story. I wish I had time to read the whole story. It's kind of a delightful tale called Senuhi. 1 second about Senuhi. Senuhi was an important guy in the palace. In the story, he goes out and does some military thing with the Pharaoh. Somehow he gets accused of doing bad things to the Pharaoh, whether he threw his sword the wrong way or he shot an arrow and it went near the Pharaoh. I don't know, but he got accused of being disloyal. And so what does he do? Like all faithful soldiers, he runs. And this is the story, what he does in the story. He runs up to Syria, stays up there a long time. Soldier finds him up there, says, what are you doing up here? He becomes a Bedouin. He becomes a prince among all. It's a whole long tale about it. Eventually he goes back to Egypt, and everybody loves him, and sorry he ever left. That's the way the story is. But this is the reading of it in this first part where the issue comes up of whether or not he is loyal or not. And you can find it on an ancient Near Eastern text. Number 19, I think is the page number. The Tale of Senuhi. He said, I gave free road to my feet going northward, and I came up to the, what? Wall of the ruler, made to oppose the Asiatics and to crush the sand crushers. I took a crouching position in a bush for fear lest the watchmen on the wall where their day's duty was might see me. So here comes Senuhi. He's trying to hide out because he's accused of doing something to the Pharaoh. He gets near the wall. He crouches down lower than I can get, and trying to keep from being hidden from the guards on the wall. This wall was known in ancient times from the Bible and from ancient history because of this passage. All right, I'm going to show you the wall now, as Egyptians would point it out. Here's the wall. They got here, in this case, there's a canal, and then they have actually some forts along the way. Here's the drawing, and here's the real thing from Egyptian history. One more here, I think I got. There you go. Again, here's the wall. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm telling you the wrong thing. You can see the fish, and this is the canal that's in the wall, and this is writing about the stuff that's in there. And then there's a fortress right there along there. This is the wall of the ruler to keep the Asiatics from coming in the country. Now, we've seen it actually on satellites. And again, this is another half-hour discussion. I'm going to do it in the 1-minute version. The newly discovered canal that was in the wall, you can see it from a satellite. It's not far off from where the Suez Canal is today. This speaks about the Israeli geologists who discovered it and so forth and so on. And it serves as a border. Okay, now I'm going to look at what the Bible says about the shore so that you know this is a biblical event and a biblical point, not a humanistic or archaeological point. Notice this. Genesis 16, 6-7. Read it with me because you're getting sleepy, I can tell. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight. So Sarai treated her, what's her's name? Hagar. Harshly. Come on, get into the reading here. Come on, let's go. He treated Hagar harshly, and she fled from her presence. Now the angel of the Lord found her by the spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. Where was she going? Who was Hagar? She's an Egyptian, right? So what's she doing? She's making tracks to go home. Right? This is a biblical subject, so you're learning things about the Bible you may not have known before. Okay, that's Genesis 16, 6-7. So where is Abraham and Sarah? They're up here near Beersheba. Hagar doesn't want to be treated harshly, so where does she head? Here's Egypt. She heads into the wilderness of the Shur because she's going home. All right? Look here, Israel and Egypt. This is from Jim Hoffmeyer. Oh, that's a different, I don't want to get there. Let's go here. Genesis 20, verse 1. Read it with me. Come on, don't go to sleep on me. Come on. Now Abraham journeyed from there toward the land of Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. Then he sojourned in Girgar. So where is that? Abraham is moving past the south, going down past the Negev and the southern part of the country. He's going towards the shore. Why? I can tell you this is in the wintertime. Wintertime you have rain, so you can move yourself to the south, right? When summer comes, no rain, you got to move yourself back a little bit more to the north to your other watering spots. All right. This is why the subjects like this are complicated, because I can't just give you one fancy show picture. I have to go through the whole biblical thing to let you know that when people say sometimes things, they're saying things against the text. They just don't know better. Genesis 25, 17 and 18. Read it with me. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he breathed his last, and he died. And he was gathered to his people, and they settled from Havilah to Shur, which is where? East of Egypt, as one goes to Assyria. So when you think of the map, you have to think of for east of Egypt as you're going to Assyria. That's what the Bible says, right? Are you with me? Okay, we're going to keep, here we go. Let's go. 1 Samuel 15:7. Read it with me. So Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is where? East of Egypt. When the Israelites left Egypt, where were they? Where did they go? Into the wilderness of what? Shur. Same thing. You see the process between the two? All right, 1 Samuel 27:8. Now David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites and the Girzites and all those other ites, for they were the inhabitants of the land from ancient times, as you come to Shur, even as far as the land of Egypt, right? All right, so here we are again. One more time. They're up in this area. They're coming across. They come across the wilderness of Shur, which is east of Egypt on the way to Assyria, right? Isn't that what the Bible says? So you go from Egypt, the wilderness of Shur, if you're going to Assyria or you're coming up this way. That is in the Bible. That's why I know where the Exodus went. Because the Bible says when they left Egypt, they were where? Into the wilderness of Shur. It's just as plain as can be. Exodus 15:22. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So they left Egypt, they were in the wilderness of Shur, Exodus 15:22. One more time, they left Egypt, they crossed over here in the wilderness of Shur. Now the problem and I don't want to say a problem, but the challenge for many people is understanding, well, what happened here? Aren't they crossing the Red Sea here? There weren't any people here. And what I'm going to tell you is that if you looked at an ancient map, we didn't have any ancient maps, but if you saw the reconstructions of those maps, I would tell you this whole area was extended down this way in a series of lakes. Here are the Bitter Lakes. Today they're not as big, as large, or as deep as they were in ancient times. But there, even today, if you look at them, there are several series of them. What has happened in the making of the Suez Canal, it's kind of drained the water sites. But along this series, there was a whole series of lakes and canals and all kind of things that was still called the Red Sea. And so I'm going to suggest, I don't have another suggestion. This is where the Israelites were according to the text. They crossed over going out this way, I think a little bit later, but they crossed water that was deep enough to drown them, and it was a significant force, and it was part of the Red Sea. That I can tell you. I've been there, spent days looking around this. I don't like to even say it. I wish they crossed down. I wish they crossed over here, because I believe God could have done it down there. But the fact is, historically, archaeologically, and biblically, they're not down here, because nobody lived here. They were up here in Pithom and Ramses, and they more likely crossed in this area where there was constructed and more water in ancient times. But they crossed in this area, they crossed over, and when they crossed the Red Sea, they were in the wilderness of Shur. Another example, a little bit more of the lakes. It's not totally done right, but there was more lakes and water up this way. But they probably crossed along the Wadi Tumalat, which is along this way, and there was connection here and water, part of the Red Sea. And the Israelites crossed somewhere in here, and when they got over there, where were they, according to this map? They were in the wilderness of Shur. Okay, why? Because this was part of the wall that the Pharaoh had built to keep people out. He didn't want those sand crossers, as they called them, and other names about them. They didn't want that to happen. All right. here's where the issue gets a little more interesting, although I kind of look at it biblically, and I think if you look at it entirely biblically, then you understand it. The number one reason why, if you look in the Seventh-day Evidence Bible Commentary, which was published in 1952, it's not a new issue, you will see that in 1952, or if you look at a dictionary from the 19th century, you will see that there have always been some people who said that the Exodus occurred, not the Exodus, but the Sinai was in Saudi Arabia. There have always been people who believe that. That's not anything new. The SDA Bible Commentary says, or some people believe, that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. I'm not going to deny that at all. I'm just saying that what we've covered so far says that when the Israelites left Egypt, they were where? In the wilderness of Shur. That's all I'm going to say at this point. But some will say because Moses went to Midian, that the Israelites had something to do with Sinai, the Mount Sinai in the Midian territory. So let's look at that. One of the most famous of the guys, and I know this guy pretty well. His name is Frank Cross. He taught at Harvard for years. He is probably I don't know if he's living now, but when I was doing archaeology, he was the most famous living linguist, at least in America, if not the world, on Semitic languages. He believes that Sinai was in Saudi Arabia. And then there are other people that I don't know, but they've kind of gotten famous because they've produced videos. One is John Bloom, and I never heard of him. I don't know what interdisciplinary biblical research is. I never heard of that before, but that's okay. He can believe in that. I don't care. What I'm going to tell you is that because Moses settled in the Midian doesn't mean Sinai's in the Midian. Let's look at the Bible, and I'll show you what the Bible says about it. Exodus chapter 2, verse 15. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled where? In the land of Midian. And he sat down by a large well, and maybe that's what Jacob, you're going to need to find a well and go sit down by it till you can find some women who come and get water from the well, and show them your bread, and we can find you a wife there. How about that? Is that a good thing, Jacob? I like to pick on Jacob. Okay. All right, so here's what I want you to see. Exodus 3, verse 1. You better start reading. I'm getting tired now. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came, the Hebrew didn't come out well, and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. All right. So let's think. There's a picture. I added Midian on there. That's where many people boast it is. According to him, the Bible, it's on the west side. Now, my question is whether it's on the west side of this arm of the Red Sea or whether it's on this side. I don't know. If you're in Midian and you go to the west side, it would seem to me that you'd be over here. But maybe not. I'm just going to say that in this case, this is where Midian is. And if we could go back one more time. And he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. I'm going to say that for my mind, it could just easily be on this arm of the Red Sea as not. But let's just look at some other passages which I think are more helpful. Okay, notice with me in Genesis 36:35. Read it with me. I'm getting tired. Then Husham died, and Hadad, the son of Bedan, who defeated Midian in the field of Moab, became king in his place, and the name of his city was Avith. So where were they fighting again? Where did this battle happen? In Moab, in the field of Moab. So notice this with me. This is here's the Midianites, and where are they fighting? They're up in Moab. All right, come on. Judges 6 verse 2. The power of the Midian prevailed against who? Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves the dens which were in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. So, where are the Midianites fighting? They're fighting with Israel. So look at them. They're here and they're here. All right, Judges 6, 3-5. Read it with me. For it was when Israel has sown that the Midianites would come up with the Amalekites and the sons of the east and go against them. so they would camp against them and destroy the produce of the land as far as what? Gaza. Have you ever heard of Gaza before? Huh? Is that where all the problems are going on? The big problems are going on as far as Gaza? And leave no sustenance in Israel, for as well as no sheep or ox or donkey, for they would come up with their livestock and their tents, and they would come up in like locusts for number. Both they and their camels were innumerable, and they came into the land to devastate it. So where are they here? They're in Gaza. Okay? So what do we have? We got them fighting in Moab, we fight them in Israel, we fight them in Gaza. So here's my point. To suggest that because Moses went to Midian, that he couldn't go anywhere else. When in the Bible, they're all over the place. What are they doing? They're roaming around. So why shouldn't we assume that when Moses took the sheep and he's on the west, that he wouldn't be roaming over here with the sheep? I don't understand it. So I'm willing, on the other hand, I'm willing for Frank Koss and other people to say that the Mount Sinai is on the east. I don't mind that. But to suggest that only because the Midianites are on the east is ridiculous, because we find them all over the place. In fact, we find them even going down to Egypt. 1 Kings 11, 15, 17 to 18. For it came about when David was in Edom, and Joab, the commander of the army, had gone up to bury the slain, and had struck down every male in Edom, that Hadad fled to where? Egypt. To Egypt. He and certain Edomites of his father's household with him, while Hadad was a young boy. They rose from Midian and came to Paran, and they took men with them from Paran and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who gave him a house and assigned him food and gave him land. So we find the Midianites and the people of that time everywhere. We don't find them in one place. These guys are roaming all over the place, and even when they need to, they go to Midian, then they go to Egypt. What's to say that Moses hadn't gone over to the Sinai with the sheep? I mean, I don't see that as logical as far as what the Bible says about the Midianites, because they're shown to be all over the place. All right. How about this verse? This is a key verse that people will get after me on. But don't you know, Pastor, Paul says that Mount Hagar, or that Hagar is Mount Sinai, and where is it found? Yeah, it's found in Arabia. Woohoo! At Genesis 4:25. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and it corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. Here is a key story. This is the fact. Just because we look at a map and see Saudi Arabia, and by the way, Saudi means land of Arabia. Saudi is the land part. Just because we see it as this place now doesn't mean it has the same name 2,000 years ago. Because names can change. Even if you look at New Mexico, at one time it had a different name, and that changed in historical times. Okay, what I'm going to tell you is that in New Testament times, the Romans believed wherever Arab lived, and they found Arabs, they believed that was the land of Arabia, because it's the land of Arabia. So let's look at a couple of old maps I've found for you. Look, here's the New Testament Arabia. I just typed in New Testament Arabia, and these are a couple examples. Here's Egypt. And what would we call this land today? We would call that today Sinai, the Sinai Peninsula. Notice what the New Testament map calls it. Arabia Petrina. Petra is up here. This is the headquarters. And what happened in New Testament times, or I should say 200 years before New Testament times, Arabs began to migrate in. And by the time of Jesus and the Apostle Paul, the Arabs had a headquarters here in Petra. And therefore, the Arabs lived all over this land, and the Romans called that land Arabia. And it went all the way up to at least Amman, if not farther north. So just because Paul talks about Arabia doesn't mean that it's like in Saudi Arabia. It only means, according to the Romans, where the Arabs live. That's a historical fact. So I can't use 20th or 21st century ideas and then superimpose them on the Bible without taking any time to try to understand what the Bible writer means. You see what I mean? So Paul does use the term, but I'm going to tell you that this area of Sinai would be considered Arabia just as much as Saudi Arabia, and even up to Mount Jordan. That would be called Arabia by the Romans too. Because why? The Arabs live there. That's the bottom line. Does that make sense? That's the bottom line. I didn't make this up. This is the map I just pulled off the web, and you can find it too. Here's another example from the same search. Here you'll see, here's Egypt, here's the Nile River, and what is this? This is the Sinai Peninsula. Notice what we got? We got Petra. That's the headquarters of Arabia at that time, according to the Romans. So looking at the biblical text only suggests one more thing, that the New Testament Romans considered Sinai to be part of Arabia. All right. But, I'm flapping my arms and my yap here as I say to my kids, where is Mount Sinai? That's the thing that everybody wants to know. So let's see what we can find out. Here's a map of scholars I got from a book. Where's Mount Sinai? Look at scholars, what they say. Woohoo! You'll even see on this side of the Jordan, over here, Mount Sinai at other sites. There's no doubt, there's no limit to the number of Sinais that there are, Mount Sinais. Here's another from a book. Notice every place where there's a diamond. Some scholar has suggested that that is Mount Sinai. All these dots are other places that a scholar has said. I'm going to tell you something right at the front. I don't believe God wants us to know. I don't believe He wants us to know because He knows that we would worship the place and not the event or the creator of that place. And what's my proof of that? We go to the Bible lands today, every place where the Bible event was, somebody built a church. And there are people on their knees worshiping that place and forgetting all about the Redeemer of that place. And He knows that if He let us know where Mount Sinai was, we'd be up there crying and whining and asking God to heal us from some disease instead of being home, because the places are gone with. In New Testament, what has happened is Jesus has gone to heaven. We don't have any more holy places on this earth. That's Bible. Isn't that what Jesus said to the woman at the well? You worship what you don't know, but us Jews know, because salvation is of the Jew. But the time is coming when you're not going to worship either in this place or any place, because you're going to worship in spirit and truth, right? That's what Jesus said. Who am I to disagree with Jesus? Did you want to say something, Pastor?
I just had a question.
Yes.
Where's the traditional Mount Sinai?
I'm going to talk about that. It's right with St. Catherine's. Okay. And I'm going to talk about it in a minute here. But that's okay. You understand what I'm saying? In Christian times, things change. In Jewish times, I was reading this morning in my Bible reading. I read the Bible. I have a Bible reading plan. For the last 5 years, I read the Bible, the Old Testament through once, the New Testament twice every year. This morning, I was reading Daniel chapter 5 and 6. That was my reading in Old Testament. Then I read Luke 3. When I was reading 5 and 6, Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. But when he was praying, what did he do? He opened his window towards where? Towards Jerusalem. That was Old Testament. In the New Testament, we open our windows to where? To heaven. Because according to Jesus, where 2 or 3 are gathered, He's in the midst. I don't worry about Jerusalem. I don't worry about Washington, D.C. or Maryland or Tacoma Park or wherever the General Conference is now. Who cares? I'm praying to the God of heaven. All that has changed in the New Testament. That is the fact. But scholars, they want to put the Sinai all over the place because they don't know. I'm sorry, I got off in the preaching about it. I'm sorry. That really have to do with measure. But I am going to tell you a little about the Sinai here. Let's see if I can tell you. Where is the Mount Sinai after the sermon? Let's go to that. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you. This is my own opinion. Take it or leave it, don't like it or doesn't matter to me. I'm going to tell you that if I had to choose a site on my deathbed, and I'm going to unenthusiastically do it and say, I think it's the most likely, here's the reasons why I'm going to be with a traditional site. Unenthusiastic, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense, but here's my thing. I unenthusiastically favor the traditional Mount Sinai for the following reasons. If you were going to choose a Mount Sinai, just say you had to, let's just say, let me do it this way. In Nigeria? Is that right? You're Nigeria? No. Help me. What country are you from? Kenya. Oh, how can I forget that? Kenya. I'm sorry, Jacob. But if you're in Kenya and two little boys are fighting and they say, my dad can beat up your dad. They ever talk like that in Kenya? The one say, my dad is the second strongest in this village. Is that what he says? He says, my dad is the second strongest? Is that what they say? No. What is my dad? He's the strongest. My dad is the best. That's what the kids were when I was a kid. Everybody could beat up everybody's dad. If you're going to choose a Mount Sinai, would you choose the second tallest? Especially when the tallest mountain is within the same site of the other one? Why would you do that? But the traditional Mount Sinai, the traditional one, is the second tallest. And the tallest is within sight. So why would you do that? To me, that's curious. So while that doesn't make much sense, I kind of favor the traditional site because it's the second tallest, because I don't see the monks who chose it looking around and saying, here, this is the second tallest, we'll just choose this one, and God chose the second. It doesn't make sense. I wouldn't go for that. So what I'm saying, if one were going to choose Mount Sinai, the natural tendency would be pick the highest mountain in the region as God's mountain. The traditional Mount Sinai is not the tallest mountain in the region. The traditional one is Jebel Musa. But Jebel Katrina, within sight, is taller. I like the idea that the second mountain is chosen because there must have been another reason for choosing the second tallest. Number two, I'm not saying this is the final thing. I'm just saying that I enthusiastically choose it. Number two, one cannot see Mount Sinai without making a special trip around it. What I'm telling you, I've been to this site perhaps 20 times. And in my younger years, probably why my back isn't any good, I've been up and down it 20 times, carrying other people's gear and everything else. But for 19 trips, I never saw the mountain. 19 trips. What am I talking about? The way Mount Sinai is that you are on another mountain as you climb. And it's only the last 45 minutes that you transition to Mount Jebel Musa, the tallest mountain. To Mount Sinai, the traditional. And you can't see the mountain from the main place. Where you come in with your car, you don't see it. And people show pictures, it's not it. You have to make a special trip around the mountain and show it from the back side, which is what I did in the last trip. I finally said, look, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again, but we're going to rent a car and we're going to go around and see if I want to take a picture from the other side. So I'm going to show you a picture from the other side. But 19 trips, and people by the busloads have climbed that mountain and never saw it. They took pictures and they said they were near it. And if you look in the SDA Bible Dictionary, you'll find a picture of, I think it was called Rush Roche or something like that, where Siegfried Horn likes that side. And one of the reasons I think he likes the side is he can't take a picture of the other one. You have to go around the other side to actually get a picture. I like the idea that it's not the tallest mountain and that one cannot see the mountain there. Those who climb it never see its summit. They only climb on it. Why pick a mountain you can't see? One answer is that it's the genuine spot. That could be. Number three, those ascetics who originally selected the traditional Mount Sinai had nothing to gain by its selection. Why choose a place, not the real tall place, second tallest, or why choose one that you can't see? It doesn't make sense. For these reasons, I think Jebel Musa is a possible candidate for the real Mount Sinai, but that's as close as I'm going to get to identifying it. I don't go there to have holy worship, although I would tell you I've been a guest at the monastery for 3 or 4 or 5 days, worked out where I could do that. It was a great experience. I enjoyed it very much, but I don't get any money for saying it. Here again is the place, and this is the way it seems to me. What happens, you're in Goshen, you cross the land and you're in the wilderness of Shur, you work your way down, and I could, if I had the time today, I could have put on all those slides. I've been able to identify all those places, and you're in Jebel Musa. That to me makes the most sense of what I've heard. And there again, one more time from the Bible map, from my old Bible, wilderness of Shur, coming down just along this way, you're there. Then you come up around, wander around, you go there, out there, and then you're in the promised land. All right, this is a picture of Jebel Musa that most people never see. Most people climb up on the back side of this mountain, on another mountain, and then when they get near the top, they're on the top, but they can't get a picture because you cannot take a picture in front of you. And that's where most people are, up here. And I want to take a picture from up here. That's where most of the people are. They're looking out this way. They think they've climbed this mountain, but they've only climbed the last 45 minutes on the mountain. They're not really on the true mountain. This is St. Catherine's Monastery, where they settled like in the 4th or 5th century. You know that supposedly Catherine, not Catherine, the mother of Constantine came here, supposedly started it. But there is some great treasures there. I'll just tell you, I don't go into long times. It's well worth visiting. There are some, they've got 6,000, I think it's 2,000 to 3,000 icons, 2,000 to 3,000 library books. I was invited to go and I looked at anything I wanted to see there. And the church is still standing from the 6th century, built by Justinian. So if you want to see what a church looks like in the 6th century, you could go there and see one that's never been destroyed. And you won't like it when they have a service there, because all the services you have to stand up the whole time. So it's kind of an interesting event. All right, let's see, I think if I told you anything. It's a Greek Orthodox church founded by Constantine and his mother Helena in the 4th century, and it's named after a young Christian virgin who was martyred in some place like Cairo or north of Cairo, maybe Alexandria, named Catherine. It was named after her. Okay, so let's talk about new discoveries, kind of move along there. As I told you last night, I don't die on these things. I don't die over where Mount Sinai is. I'm going to die for New Jerusalem. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die on that. Because the only thing that's solid is the New Jerusalem. I do not care about anything on this earth. It's all going to be burned up at the end, that's for sure. All right, so let's talk about it, Mr. Wyatt. A nurse anesthetist passed away in August '99. I'm sorry that he died. He's a self-proclaimed archaeologist who claimed to have discovered many things, including a new Israelite crossing site. So let's talk about it. First of all, I'm going to say, even though here's the people who follow him, I don't know most of these guys, but Jonathan Gray. Jonathan Gray was an evangelist in Australia. I was out in Australia for a month giving these lectures and a whole bunch more. And he was out touting this very thing. And these other people, and including others, are still supporting the ideas after Mr. Wyatt has passed. They have this, or at least they have had, I don't keep up with what they're doing, but in Tennessee they had a museum there. And this is Jim Pankowski, his artist, wrote a comic book and other things supporting him. And then there was a video guy. I didn't know this guy. It came to me in another video. I took pictures off of this video to help me with this presentation. Maybe you know this guy. I don't know. He was some kind of a medical doctor or medical person, dentist, something. I don't know. The name Lamart Moeller. And he produced a video. Same stuff. I don't know her at all, but she was on the video. And here it is, the idea of the genuine Mount Sinai. And just based on what things are said, here's the kind of supporting things that I read and hear from the video. First of all, we know that this is Mount Sinai because God came and was on top of the mountain. And his fire was so strong and mighty that it's turned, even to this day, all the stones are black because of the presence of God and his power, right? Unfortunately for that idea, and I meant to do it, but in northern Jordan, which is just a few hundred miles to the north, we have a whole city that is made out of basalt, which is a black stone. And I can just tell you by looking at it, basalt is a very common feature. And to have a mountain made out of basalt is not a strange event. It's just not. For example, just writing on this very thing, the Lord descended on it in fire. But look, if you just drive around the Sinai, I'm not saying this is a mountaintop, but I am saying that when you drive around, the same kind of black. Is this supposed to believe that God sat down at these places where there's all this black basalt? No, it's just a remnant of earthquake that came and produced this black stone. It's on mountains, whole cities. Like I told you, if you get on the internet and type in the word Jamal, which means the mother of camels, you'll pop up a city in which the whole city was made out of black basalt that makes it black because it is part of a volcano that produces black stone. So when I see a mountain like that, I'm buying, my friends, we're saying, hey, look at that mountain. It's got a lot of basalt on it. We don't think that it's only been black since the time of the sign of Jesus coming, or Moses sat down. Think about it. Any of you ever seen pictures of Mount St. Helens? The day after it exploded, you think it's always going to look like that? No, it's going to reconstruct. It's already reconstructed. It's the nature of the way God healed the land. So to think you could go back 2,000 years, and because God was on fire there and brought down fire, it's never going to heal, is kind of foolish. It's like I said last night. It's like believing that when a building burns down, it fills up. That's not thoughtful. And to think that something happened 2,500 years ago, and because God's presence was there, it's still black, that doesn't give His power of nature any area to work at all. And so basalt like that is very common all over the Sinai and all over Saudi Arabia at the same time. Okay. Oh, let's see, I forget what. I think I just showed this because this you can see. If you could see better, you can see this whole area. And this is on the other side. This is where the many basalt places are found. Okay, here's another thing. This is supposed to be the altar where Moses offered I think it's the golden calf or something there. Because why? Because it's supposed to look like an altar, right? He built an altar in front of the calf. And because it looks like an altar, according to the writer, it is the altar. But I thought that the instructions of the Bible were that you took 12 stones, unworked by hand. Does that look like it's built by 12 stones, built by hand? But somebody has the imagination to say, ooh, that's an altar there? I'm saying that the Bible says you take 12 stones, unmarked, uncut stones, and you built them by hand. I'm going to say that doesn't look like an altar built by hand according to the way. And then they say, well, there are some drawings, and it looks like a calf. And of course, that has to be from the golden calf. Well, I'm going to say that we found in Jordan at our dig site a whole cave full of pictograms and so forth like that. That's unusual. All over the Sinai you can find the same kind of pictograms because people from the beginning of history. In Albuquerque, we have a whole park. I think it's called Pictogram National Park, right? People have always wanted to make their mark. So to me, these kind of things are not evidence of anything at all. And this is a picture came off that video showing the cow from Egypt sources. Again, it's not stating anything. This is that lady, and she's saying that they put this fence up, so it matters a lot. Okay, let's look at Exodus 17:6. To me, taking a picture and saying it's something is not the same as what the Bible says. Exodus 17:6. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders. So, according to the video, Psalm 105, there's a picture, and God struck the rock, and He made it like that. So who said that God did that to that rock? The guy who produced the video. It doesn't say it in the Bible. There are a few other billion other rocks in the Sinai and the Saudi Arabia. To say that that rock is the one is, to me, fetching an evidence that is not there. Oops. Anyway, the commentator on that video said it was split the rock. All right, let's look at the crossing site itself. This I know a little bit more about, and I can share a little bit. This I took off the video. You can see how this area is highlighted. It so happens that this area here is the area that's called, the city is called Nueva, if you want to look at it on a map. Part of what I've done in my life is certainly not wanting to be involved with Ron Wyatt, but in asking me to write on articles, I can't do it and not be there. I have to. It's my nature. I have to actually do the work and see it for myself. That's part of what I do. So I organized a team of students, and I think it was in 06, in March of 06 or something like that. and you were already done with the seminary, I think, Pastor. At least you didn't go with me. Shame on you. But we got a group of people, and some of them were already scuba divers. I actually took scuba lessons myself, almost drowned myself. I am the worst scuba diver in the history of the world of scuba divers. They probably would have had to give up the sport if I kept at it. But I did it just so I could go here and scuba dive. That's the truth. I'm going to show you a picture of me in a wetsuit. That's a sight to behold. You don't want to miss that. But I took my students to this very spot right here. And on my journey, one of my students was an ardent supporter of Ron Wyatt. For the 10 days or 6 days or how many it was till we got there, he was arguing with me solid, especially about this. Well, he said, I've seen those anchor stones. They're definitely there. And I've seen those chariot wheels. I know they're there. And I was mostly teasing him back and forth. But in the end, I just said, look, we're going to be there in a day or two. We'll know for a fact. But there are other things that are not logical. And I pointed out the things I've said to you. When you cross from Egypt and you go into the wilderness of Shur, you can't be in Saudi Arabia. That's not possible. Nobody in the history of science, of biblical archaeology, has ever said the wilderness of Shur is in Saudi Arabia. So how can this be? And so he and I were, we were back and forth about this whole thing. Again, this is another picture of the same thing. The web is on the left, and this is the path from the video and so forth. Here's the car that took us down there on the way to Nueva. And here's one of the things we found along the way. This is the kind of stuff that makes it very difficult, being an archaeologist, to accept anything with Mr. Wyatt. Here's a picture from his book that shows him on a column. And Mr. Wyatt describes two columns that mark the Israelite crossing point. This column he's standing beside is the one on the west side. But the other one, is of a genuine marker for the crossing site, would even be even more important. This picture is taken from Mr. Wyatt's book. So here's the deal. I'm talking to Mr. Piankowski on the phone, his right-hand man while Wyatt was alive. And he's telling me these things. And I said to him, look, if this is true, because Mr. Wyatt says there's a column like this on the east side, in Saudi Arabia's side. And on that column is not only the name of several other things, but the name of Solomon. Here's the historical fact, the archaeological fact. We do not have the name of Solomon written anywhere in ancient times on anything except the Bible. And critical scholars say that's the proof that the Bible is not true. Now the fact is, archaeology has the favor, the Bible has the favor, archaeology finds things. The same thing was said about 20 years ago. But now we found about the name of David because we didn't have David's name on any archaeological find. Now we found it about 5 times. And so the critics are shut up about that. But if this was true, that the name of Solomon was found on a column, that would be a stupendous find. And I said to Piankowski, look, if you get me that picture of that, I will promise, not only will I make you famous, I'll make Mr. Wyatt famous, and I'll be famous just because I produced it. That's a fact, and it'll be a great benefit to the work of God. That was in 1993. Never seen it, never produced it. Nobody's ever seen it, because I don't believe it exists. Why didn't it exist? Well, I'm going to tell you a secret about archaeologists. We don't have enough to do. So we sit up and make work for ourselves. That's the bottom line. And anything that you can find, we can organize it. Doesn't matter how boring it is, we can organize it. That's the bottom line. And here's a column that Mr. Wyatt says is from the time of Solomon, because Solomon's name is on it, one just like it on the other side, right? That's the point of his finding, okay? Wyatt describes a Phoenician-style granite column erected on the shore with inscriptions in archaic Hebrew. The Saudis, according to the book, the Saudis took numerous photographs of this column, and Ron suddenly had a little more credibility with his jailers. Archaic Hebrew simply isn't found in Saudi Arabia, and here was some very concrete evidence. Noting carefully the Phoenician or archaic Hebrew letters, we were later able to have it translated. It contains the name of Mizraim, Solomon, Edom, Death, Pharaoh, Moses, and Yahweh. I want to tell you, if that's a true statement, this would be a stupendous find, and I wouldn't be here. I would be over in Berlin showing the pictures to people and telling them I've always believed in Ron Wyatt. I always thought he was faithful. If these were true pictures, if they really exist, but they don't. That's why nobody has ever seen them at all. Okay, and there's some other thing about this that Mr. Wyatt didn't know. According to Mr. Wyatt, this was set up by the Israelites in earlier times, but the fact is they have records of the road workers along the road setting up the column themselves. The column on the west side is easy to find, and we have seen it many times. It was set up by next to the road by Nueva to St. Catherine's Monastery by Israel road workers many years ago. The thing that surprises the professional archaeologists is Wyatt's claim that this column is Solomonic from the Iron Age or 10th century BC. This is a known falsehood. Why? Like I told you, archaeologists don't have enough to do. We organize things. We know how things are. And so what we know is that this column is from the Roman or the Byzantine times. That would be from the time of Jesus to the time of Justinian. That's the time it would be. How do we know? Because we know what columns are like in other times. One of the important jobs of archaeologists is categorizing artifacts. Cylindrical columns are typical of Roman Byzantine periods. Indeed, it is correctly identified as a Roman column in a guidebook. Mr. Wyatt's an archaeologist. He doesn't know about this. But in a guidebook, it's a guidebook called Sinai Guide to the Peninsula and Red Sea by Amor and Tamor and Gerhard Viad. It says this is a Roman column along the way. For whatever reason, Mr. Wyatt doesn't know that. Columns similar to the one Mr. Wyatt describes can be found at many Roman period sites, as these are on the right side at Jerash. These two are carved out of a single piece of stone and are topped by a ring collar. These columns date to the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. And somebody's saying they're from the 10th century BC, claiming that Solomon's name is on there. Let's see it. As I said to Piankowski, send it to me. I'll be the first one to make Mr. Wyatt famous. Because this would be a stupendous find. It's never been shown to anyone because it doesn't exist. Okay, here's the column tops again. All right, here's the columns. While some cylindric columns are known earlier in ancient Egypt, they are quite different style. King Solomon had, however, used square pillars in his architecture, not columns. In other words, in the time of David and Solomon, they didn't have round columns. They had square ones, as in this picture from the front of a book. The architectural style is called Proto-Ionic, and it's made out of square blocks in a rectangular form, built them that way. That's from the time of Solomon. That's how I know for a fact Mr. Wyatt doesn't know what he's talking about. That's the bottom line. He's looking at a Roman period site, saying that it belongs in 10 centuries earlier. And these are the kind that are found in that time period, and it's a conclusion. You can actually go to the Israel Museum and find one of the columns right there. They've got one from the Proto-Ionic period. It's just as clear as can be. There's what the archaeology says. That's what Mr. Wyatt says. That's why I know we'll never see something with Solomon's name on it, because it didn't exist. But what about the chariot wheels? Got to forget the chariot. So I'm with my friends, my students. We're in a bus. We're talking about this all the way for several days when we got here. And my student says, I can't wait till we get there. And we finally get there. And what I had done is I had made reservations in Nueva with a dive master who had a few motel rooms, not really motel rooms, but little rooms. They could rent them out for several days while you were diving. And so we pulled into the place. I wish I could remember the guy's name. I meant to see if I could find his name, but I didn't know that. And the fact is that there are many kind of wheels in the Red Sea, because over the years there have been shipwrecks of all kinds. Many wheels are there from all different periods, from cars and trains and motorcycles and tanks. They've all sunk in the bottom of the Red Sea. I'm going to show you a couple of those. All right, here's the wreck that was found there. A World War II ship carried gun carrier, tanks, 20 trucks, locomotives, all kind of things that are sunk down there, and you can find scattered around remnant from those wrecks that are well known. And why are they well known? Because this is a great diving area. People from around the world come to the Red Sea to dive in the Red Sea, and so they know where these are for people to go and dive in these places. All right, here's my group of guys. We came in March of 06, to investigate the claims of the chariot wheels. I don't remember which guy was the most ardent, but one guy was so excited about this. We jumped out of the van. All of us had been tired, and I don't remember how long we'd driven that day, but we kind of jumped out of the river, out of the van, and as we got down out of the van, the dive master came out on the porch of his little, he had a little office there. And when he came out of the porch, the guy who was the most ardent, he jumped out on the other side of the van from me, and he said, "Hey, we've come here to dive and see the chariot wheels." And you would have thought that the dive master had been somebody dumped ice water on his head. He just stood there and looked, and the guy said again, "We came to dive and see the chariot wheels." And the dive master said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Well, he said, "I'm sure lots of other people come to see the chariot wheels." He said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you... He said, "Nobody ever came here." So, he said, now that you mention it, he said, it seemed like a few years ago somebody came and said something about it, but I don't know what you're talking about. You're not talking about tabletop coral, are you? Because the student began to describe what it was. They're kind of flat, and they have their spoke down, and as he talked, he said, "Oh, you must be talking about tabletop coral." And the student said, "What?" Well, he said, "We do have a coral species that kind of has a stalk that comes up and it's kind of flat on the top. Are you talking about that?" And the student said, No. I'm talking about chariot wheels that are found off this coast." And the guy says, "I've been the dive master and the owner here for 20 years. I've never really heard about that before." So just to prove that I was actually there, there's my picture with my student. Aren't I a beauty? As my wife would say, probably a beached whale. There I am. Here's the dive master. I'm going to look his name up. I'm assuming he's alive. Can you believe he's a master diver and smokes cigarettes? I could never get over that. Chain smoked. How could that be? So I don't know if he's still kicking or not, but that's him. And so we start talking about it, and he just seems incredulous. Well, my diving experience was so limited, and I was such a lousy diver, they made me stay in the shallows here, and I actually did some diving there because the tabletop coral is in very deep water, a little farther south. And so the actual real divers, my students got to go there. I didn't get to go there, but there it goes. And here's some of the wheels. Let's look at wheels since we're here. Here's the chariot wheel off of this Egyptian painting, and there's a picture, a little close-up of what a chariot wheel looks like. There it is. And here's the chariot wheel, again, another example of chariot wheels. And here's some of the pictures that I've gotten off of the videos that have been passed around, like Mr. Wyatt's and the guy, the other video I showed you. Here's the way the chariot wheel. This is supposed to be the wheel, and then this is the stock of the wheel. Have you ever noticed how interesting it is how many wheels break off and fall down like that, where you just have them on one side? Top part is here, the spoke is there, and the other part of the wheel's on. Isn't that ever seem interesting to you? They fell like that. They never fall like this. They never fall any other way virtually, except flat like this with a stock like that. Okay, here's another picture of another one of these chariot wheels, and I guess this is the other wheel there. And then notice from this picture, what does it say? Recreation. I'm not sure what they recreated here, but that's the picture as it was recreated. Again, this is another recreation of how this wheel ran, and here's the way the stoke was. Interesting how they have a tendency to fall mostly like that. To me, that's very curious. Another example of another one of these chariot wheels that fell like that. Here's this one here. Like they never fall this way. They're always on end like that. Okay. Here's another example of a chariot wheel. There's the wheel, and there's the spoke, and then we don't have another wheel down there. It's just a spoke. Again, am I going the wrong way? Recreation. In other words, that's not the way it looks. Somebody made it in there to make it look. Another chariot wheel like this. So another example. Notice the artistic work in there to make sure you can see it. And here's a tire from an old regular car, probably in an axle. These are just pictures of things that are in the sea. Okay, these are my students. After he got with them and took them down, here are my students, and there's Sam, I guess in the front. I didn't identify them all well, but here's a tabletop coral right here. Just look at some of these. Here's some more tabletop coral here and here. Another example here. Stalk hasn't grown up yet. Another tabletop coral. Notice it's kind of like that. Here's tabletop coral there, and that's Sam again. Here's another tabletop coral, and there's spoke again there. Here's tabletop coral, another one there. This is Simeon Appel. Another tabletop coral there. Another tabletop coral, and it spoke down this way. All right, when I got back, I ordered a book on coral in the Red Sea. It reads so that I don't understand it very well. But I'll tell you something else. I went over to the Chicago Museum, Chicago Aquarium. They call it the Shed Museum. I took my kids there, and in the large container where the largest fish are, like the big sharks and all that, you know what they had in there? A fake one, but you know what they had? They had a tabletop coral in there. Just perfectly. I should have taken a picture of that, and I'd put it here and said it was the Red Sea. You wouldn't have known. But anyway, I didn't do that. So anyway, from this book, Underwater Paradise, the outer and most exposed area of reef, lastly, are dominated by a genus Acropora, whose species 15 in the Red Sea can be considered to be madreporous par excellence. At greater depths, on the other hand, the Acropora tend to expand, forming platform-shaped or umbrella-shaped colonies with full, flat surfaces supported by a columnar base. That is a tabletop coral. My student there was devastated. Oh, I was sure these were chariot wheels. They weren't chariot wheels at all, unfortunately, for the story. But what about the land bridge? Before we got out of the car and got unloaded, already my student was devastated because the dive master didn't know what he was talking about, chariot wheels. So he changed the subject. And he said, yeah, but I don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand the tabletop coral. What about the land bridge? We want to explore the land bridge. Again, the dive master looked like he was slapped in the face. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, land bridge. What do you mean by that? And the kid said, well, you know how it's a lot more shallow in crossing here than it is down southern part? Oh, he said, that is true. And if you look on the recreations of this, here's a recreation of this supposed land bridge. Here's the way it is on this side in the south, and there it is to the north. But here you have this shallow bridge. And so that the Israelites, when they came to this area, they would have stopped here and God would have opened the way and they would have just marched right through there, right? And so that's what my student wanted to see. So he said, we want to dive and see the chariot wheels, but then we want to go and see the land bridge. The dive master said, what? You don't know what you're talking about. I've been here 20 years. I never heard of a land bridge before. He says, come on in to my office. I want to show you I'm trying to say aeronautical, but I know what's it called, a boat map. Nautical, thank you. A nautical map of this area right here. He said, really? I said, yeah, come on in and look at my map. There's the dive master, and he has the map just off to his side. Yeah. Anyway, I'll read the part first, then I'll show you a closer view of it. Okay, underwater cliffs. Wyatt and followers fail to note that when crossing from west to east, there is a series of precipice dropouts. Here's the point. Even people go around saying this. All you have to do is get a nautical map of the Red Sea in the east of Nueva. You'll find there is no land bridge. That's the point of what this says. There are precipices and drop-offs right off the edge. I'll show you better the map. Here's the map that was right there in the dive master's office. And right here's the section of Nueva that we are. And this is where it is. There you see, there's Nueva right there. And if you go out about, I think it's 100 feet, it drops down 225 feet. So let's say we go out and we drop down 225 feet. That's not bad. But if you go out another 50 feet or 100 feet, how far does it drop? 1,076. What's the tallest mountain here? How tall is it? Do we have a mountain here? Are we on a mountain? Okay, is 1,000 feet, if you walk down 1,000 feet, would that be a pretty good walk? Okay, I'm not, you can see I'm not a really good cover. But if you look on this nautical map, I've changed it from meters just to, I've changed it into feet, just so you can see from meters, because it's English kind of thing. That's on this side, over here. But you look on this side, before you get over here, you know how deep it is? 216 feet, 2,616 feet, 2,597, 2,486, 2,551 feet, 1,866. So when you leave, you go down 1,000 feet, off 100 feet out. You go down, and I can tell you, I dove over there. I'm one of those chicken divers. I go to the edge, and I don't want to even look over there. I want to come back before the big thing comes and gets me. So I came to the edge of 100 feet out. Woohoo, I'm going to stay on this side. But if you go out and go over almost to the other side, not only does it drop 1,000 feet, it drops another 1,500 feet before you get to the other side. So you're with Grandma and Grandpa and the kids and everybody, and you're crossing across. You're going to go, it's not even, 6 or 8 miles across? You're going to drop down 1,000 feet, then you're going to drop down another 1,500 feet, then come up on the other side, and that's a land bridge? All you have to do is look at the nautical chart that's on the wall, and my student was devastated because the nautical chart just makes it plain it's not a land bridge. Is it deeper farther to the south? It is. Is it deeper to the north a little bit? It is. But that doesn't make this a land bridge. It's not genuine there at all. So here's the conclusions that I would draw of this. The biblical data points to an Exodus route from the eastern delta. All right? When the Israelites left Egypt, they entered the wilderness of Shur. Number 3, when all the biblical data is considered, the Sinai Peninsula is most assuredly the location of Mount Sinai. Number 4, while the traditional location of Mount Sinai is interesting, the exact location of Mount Sinai is uncertain. And I'm going to tell you, it's never going to be certain because God doesn't want us to worship things or places. That's the bottom line. Questions? You have some questions for me? I took diving just to show you this, so be thankful that I risked my life for that. Yes, Jacob.
Bible say anything about a land bridge?
No. No?
What were they looking for one for then?
Who was?
The students.
Well, because they wanted to see what Mr. Wyatt said was a land bridge. Mr. Wyatt is the one who introduced the subject of land bridge. So they were, at least one of them was kind of a follower of Mr. Wyatt and believed that he would find a land bridge. Yes, Jacob?
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Question number 1, when you consider the ark and maybe like Mount Sinai
Yeah.
and maybe Red Sea
Yeah.
and even the Daniel in the lion's den,
Yes.
are we supposed to take this? Is it important for us to take these stories literally?
I do.
So what's the importance of taking it literally?
Because all those stories have value for me. I can trust God to take care of my needs if I can believe that He took care of Daniel's need on Daniel's behalf. Couldn't I trust Him in my behalf? I don't necessarily face lions every day, but I might someday. And if I know that my God is bigger than the lions, then I have security. Right? When it comes to Noah's Ark, here's the deal. The flood answers a whale of a lot of questions for me about geology. And I'm not a geologist, I don't want to get into all that, but I am a strong believer. I'm a strong believer in creation. And I know that the flood answers a lot of questions about the geological column. I have friends who are smart, and they understand, they're geologists, they understand all that. I don't get it. I sit there and shake my head and explain it. But I know that if we didn't have a flood model, we'd have a hard time explaining the geological column. With the geological column, there's a lot of other things that the flood model does come about, and is very helpful for me. And what was the other story you mentioned?
Well, no, the second question was that
You said the flood. You said Noah's Ark and Daniel, and I missed another one.
the ark, Mount Sinai,
Mount Sinai. Okay, right,
I'm just taking the note here.
right.
It's the importance whether you see it. Well, the question number 2 is that I believe that the Bible is a very highly philosophical book,
Yes,
and therefore it tells us, or it reveals to us, the way of life and how we are supposed to live
yes,
as made for the second coming of Jesus Christ.
right,
However, I don't believe in the ark
right,
as something literal,
right,
and I also don't believe like in the Red Sea as something that is literal. But when I read the Bible,
right.
all I want to take from all these stories, is the lessons which they've been told
Right.
others.
So you're saying that if I went out scuba diving out there, that I was pretty safe because I wouldn't have drowned it in the Red Sea anyway, because you didn't believe it existed. If it didn't exist, that I couldn't have drowned it in.
Well,
Right?
let me finish my question.
Oh, okay, all right,
So I take them to be just symbolic,
right,
but not literal.
okay,
Because all I need from all those stories is the lessons that I can get from all those stories that I'm being told. So
Right.
my question is, am I wrong to take them symbolically and not literally?
I'm not about to say you're right or wrong. That's not my place. But I would say that if I take away the reality of the event, I take away the value of the event. You know, let's say I'd have to think of a good illustration, but what assigns something value to me seems something that's real. Pardon?
Take the cross with
Yeah, if you take the cross and you say, we only need to realize that it didn't really happen, but he might have done that. He might have died for us. That takes it entirely to a different level. And to believe that God not only could save Daniel, but he did save Daniel, puts God a lot more thoughtful in my mind that he might do the same for me, that he might answer my prayers. You know, I don't want to keep. I'm supposed to start the other one now, aren't I? And I need to use the restroom real quick. But can I tell you one little story and start? I got invited to the National Geographic magazine people. I didn't tell you that story yet, did I? They tried a year to get me to come. I had a friend. I was in the know in the archaeological circles, not because I was important, but because my museum at Andrews was well known. And so they wanted me because I had a friend who was on the same committee I was, which was the organizing committee of the archaeological major organization. And he knew I was a creationist. And they wanted to have a creationist come to the National Geographic office and speak to the issue of creation. They spent a year inviting me. I mean, every month a lady would write me a note, send me a call. I kept saying no. And I kept telling her. Finally I said to her, look, I don't want to come because you're going to make me look foolish. You're going to cut and spice, and when I'm done, I'm going to be saying that my wife has 4 legs in 3 years, and I'm going to get beat to death. You know, you're going to cut it and paste. I don't like that. I don't want to be that way. And then she said, oh, we would never do that. We would never do that. And I said, oh, you know, you guys are tricky. But after a year, I said, okay, I'll come. So I had to go to Jamaica. And I told him I would come the next week. I said, I've got to go to Jamaica and give a couple of papers down there. When I get back, I'll come back, and I'll come on Friday or Thursday, and I'll speak to you then. So who would want to go and be the one that has to speak for all Christendom? And so I wasn't sure how I would actually approach it. But the Lord brought the answer to me. On the way down, I saw the answer. And so I went down there, and on the way back, I saw what I needed. I bought it, and then I went to the National Geographic office. I read the thing I had found, and they put you in a room. You're by yourself in the middle. They got lights on. You can't see anybody else. You have the director of the program. You got the writer who writes after the fact, and then you had one other person who was a helper doing something, and there I was, and they started out, and she started out. Well, Dr. Merling, you have a Ph.D. Yes, I do. And you believe in a literal creation, don't you? I said, can I ask you a question before we get started? She got all befuddled. She said, well, I guess so. I said, I just had 2 questions for you. Number 1, are you married? she really got befuddled then, because you don't talk about being married in academic terms. You know, who cares about marriage? She said, well, I'm not, but I might. And I said, oh, that's nice. I said, think you'll ever have kids? She said, well, I might, I don't know. I said, I can tell you something about you and your husband and your kids. She said, what's that? I said, you're never going to love your kids. You're never going to love your husband. And she said, how can you dare say that? And I said, I can tell you that because of the famous archaeological, historical, scientific journal called National Geographic Magazine. On the cover of the magazine this month is an article about love. And what your magazine says is love is only a chemical reaction. So you're ever only going to have a chemical reaction towards your husband or your kids. I'm always going to love my kids and my wife because I learned about love from God. And that began 3 hours of discussions about creation and why I believe in God and why I believe. And once in a while my members have told me they've seen me on, somebody came back a month or two ago, saw me on the airline. They were showing an old National Geographic thing and it was on there. But I'm sure that first part was not on there. In any case, my belief in God is everything about who I am. I can't believe that this is all. I don't believe that when I die, and it might be tomorrow, an airplane crash, a car accident, I hope I go on for another 100 years. I'm planning on another 100 years. Like I told you, my wife and I are going to go on at least another 50 years. But when that doesn't happen, this is not all for me. Because I know that I learned about love from the cross. And that gives me love for you, Jacob. That gives me love for everybody here and makes me a different person than somebody who doesn't have, than the lady who was in charge of the magazine. Because deep down, when we got down to it, she had to say, either she's going to disagree with her magazine and evolution, or she has to join my side. She don't want to join my side and believe in God. And I spent 3 hours with those people. They were great people. And they actually, when we were done, they followed me down to the cafeteria and we talked another hour or two. Because the writer, he wanted to say, well, you know, Dave, can't we let God do some of it? You know, we'll get him to get things started out going, you know, and then after he gets started doing some of it, then it'll just progress naturally. I said, oh, I understand that. That's a good thought. I appreciate that. You want a God you can put in your pocket. And every once in a while, you'll take him out of your pocket and let him do something. Then you'll put him back in your pocket. I said, the God I worship is bigger than that. He's so big that he can create the universe. And we don't worry about how far the stars are away because he created the beams between them at the same time. He made it look old, even though it's not old, because he doesn't have anything to do with time. He created this world. He made Adam and Eve tall and ready and strong. He didn't make Adam to be a 1-year-old baby and grow up. He made him tall. And if you saw him, we'd say, man, how old are you, Adam? And I know exactly how old he'd say. He'd say, I'm 66. That's been increasing now every year for the last 40 years. But I'd say, the perfect age in life. He would say, I'm 66, the perfect age in life. Like I said, it's been growing for 40 years. But I said, he made him, and all the trees. If you were to get there like any modern plan, you'd go with a axe and you would chop down the tree. And you know what you'd find? You'd find tree rings in there. Why? Because a tree can't stand without rings. And so he would make them look old. And when geologists look in the ground and they're trying to find out the age of the earth, it looks old to them. Because God made it to be mature and standing right. So I have no question about this earth, that God is strong and wise. Why would I try to put him in my pocket and then pull him out when I need him? Because I can hardly make it a day without needing him any time and all the time. So that's how that went for 3 hours. I need to make a quick restroom stop. Are you guys going to all disappear on me if I do? I'll try to be back and we'll try to finish this fast. I never did the other. This is a new one for me, so it'll take me a little bit.
Dr. Merling, are we done with the first session? Then everybody takes a break?
We are going to be done, but if we have questions yet, I'll still be glad to take them. But you can move my slides if you want to.